Welcome everyone. This is Emergency Jazz with James, and that's right, we have made it to episode 10. And after 9 episodes of tracing the first century of jazz, we have found ourselves right here in the 21st century with some seriously exciting music. Now, notwithstanding the economic fallout of COVID-19 and larger scale funding issues around the world, we are living in a golden age of jazz. We have tracked several themes throughout this series, things like jazz artists' predilection towards collaborating outside their normal artistic circles, jazz's underlying principles of ensemble communication, no matter its aesthetic, and the vast potential of jazz harmonic and rhythmic techniques to fuse with other musics. Today, I want to show you that it is these themes, these ideas, that rescued jazz from its relative obscurity in the 1990s and the noughties, when it was predominantly seen as either too abstract and exclusive for the mainstream listenership, or simply too nostalgic. And more than this, today I want to give you all the tools you need to navigate the 21st century jazz world so that you can start to understand both where this music came from and where it's going. Now, there was some great jazz music coming out of the first decade of the 21st century. However, it wasn't really considered cool to listen to or even play jazz in the mainstream at the time, but this was about to change. In 2012, an LA-based jazz pianist called Robert Glasper created an album called Black Radio, a jazz album unlike anything we had seen before in that it fused jazz with hip-hop and neo-soul. And on top of a core jazz quartet of Chris Hodge on bass, Casey Benjamin on saxophone, Chris Dave on drums, and Robert Glasper on keys, Black Radio featured a host of guest performers from the hip-hop and neo-soul world, including singer extraordinaire Erykah Badu, singer Bilal, rapper Common, and DJ Jahi Sundance. Now, Black Radio was Glasper's 5th studio album, with the first 4 being more straight-ahead jazz. But Glasper's love of hip-hop and desire to reconcile the audiences from both worlds pushed him to create something that would redefine jazz for many listeners around the world. The idea behind this album was that rap, neo-soul and jazz all had common roots, even if they had developed independently for decades. Concepts of improvisation, groove, ensemble communication, they were all common to these musics. But perhaps what was stopping all of this from fusing previously was the enormous challenge of reconciling electronic drum beats with traditional drum kit playing, and certainly the aesthetic divide between vocal and instrumental technique in each world played a large role. But this is exactly where we see the brilliance in the Glasper Experiment's approach. They managed to adopt sounds from both worlds without diminishing either. But before I explain how they did this, let's listen to the most famous track from this 2012 Black Radio album, Afro Blue, featuring Erykah Badu on vocals.
Dream of a land my soul is from.
Now, we actually heard this song, Afro Blue, much earlier in Emergency Jazz, as it was originally written by Mongo Santa Maria in 1959. Check out episode 6 on Latin jazz for more on that. The Robert Glasper Experiment have completely reworked this melody though, using an irresistible groove, as you heard there, a lush soundscape of acoustic piano, and the heavy bass and drum sound of hip-hop. Chris Dave, one of the most innovative drummers from the last 20 years, he builds characteristics of electronic hip-hop style drums into his acoustic drum kit technique. Things like the glitch beat, where the bass and snare drum fall just a nanosecond before the hi-hat in his groove. Derek Hodge on bass changes his tone to a more heavier R&B sound, all while maintaining his ever virtuosic outline of the complex jazz harmony that underpins all of this music. And ever present is Robert Glasper himself, who frames all of these melodies and sounds with the characteristic kaleidoscope of colour that is his comping technique on piano. Black Radio was huge. It won the R&B Grammy Award that year. A jazz album won the R&B Grammy Award, and its most crucial success was bringing not only jazz audiences, but also those of the neo-soul and hip-hop worlds as well. Robert Glasper's Black Radio started something of a chain reaction of cross-collaborations between jazz and hip-hop, and there's one of these that stands head and shoulders above the rest, and that is Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly from 2015. Now, some of you won't have expected this in today's episode, but Kendrick Lamar is a large part of why jazz is back. His album featured jazz and funk legends Thundercat on bass, Robert Glasper of course on keys, funk singer George Clinton, Ambrose Akinmusire on trumpet, and a saxophonist called Kamasi Washington. And all of these characters amongst the rappers and poets that epitomised the hip-hop scene on the west coast of America. To Pimp a Butterfly was certified platinum, topping the US and UK charts, and simply put, it remains one of the most profound and polystylistic hip-hop albums ever made. It has since been adopted as something of an anthem in the recent Black Lives Matter protests, with its strong messages against racial discrimination and the beauty and variety of African American art, something exemplified by its fusion of hip-hop and jazz. Check out a section of this track, For Sale, from To Pimp a Butterfly.
Get ya. I'ma go hit the throttle with you. Smoking, looking, broken, the danger till I'm out with you. Cause I want you.
Just 2 months after To Pimp a Butterfly's release, in May 2015, the saxophonist from that album, Kamasi Washington, released his first album as a band leader. This work was called The Epic, and it was a 3-hour marathon of wonders featuring some of the finest jazz players on the west coast of the US. The Epic piggybacked on the crossover audience that Robert Glasper, Kendrick Lamar, and many others had started to form in the first half of the 2010s. And as a result, The Epic saw unprecedented success in more mainstream listenerships. But this album's success was not just due to Kamasi's hip-hop connections. The Epic is transcendent, in that it effortlessly transports us back to the simplicity and power of hard bop and cool jazz, mixes this with the mysticism and wonder of Sun Ra and Alice Coltrane, seasons it with a whole load of funk and soul influences, and then Kamasi trusts his players enough to just set them off and let them create. And the results are breathtaking. This music feels like a stunning cosmic journey, yet it also has the atmosphere of some friends getting together and jamming. It's about their musical communication, and it's about their groove and solos where feeling is more important than chops. Let's listen to the smoothed out version of the bebop chart Cherokee from this album, which epitomizes Kamasi's relaxed approach to his performances.
So tender inside my.
While this was all happening in the United States, an equally extraordinary jazz scene was developing back home right here in the UK. However, these UK artists didn't just mimic or adapt American-style jazz, they developed quite independently, using the polyglot musical carnival of London's countless cultural and musical influences. Everything from calypso and dubstep to grime and Afrobeat was combined with the musical language of Coltrane's Giant Steps in a fresh musical boiling pot. At the head of this 21st century UK jazz scene is the supremely creative and flexible saxophonist and clarinetist Shabaka Hutchings. At 36, Hutchings is actually one of the elders of the UK jazz scene, and he's currently leading not one, but 3 of the most innovative new projects in the UK: Shabaka and the Ancestors, Sons of Kemet, and The Comet is Coming. Now, these are all extremely different ensembles, and it's worth taking a closer look here because it can show us just how diverse this London jazz world is. The trio Comet is Coming is made up of Shabaka on saxophone, Dan Levers on keyboard, and drummer Max Hallett, although they go by the pseudonyms King Shabaka, Danalog, and Betamax, respectively. This group fuses jazz with psychedelic rock, funk, electronica, and Afrobeat, and they are the heirs of Sun Ra in their intergalactic mashup of melodies and grooves. Shabaka saves his most muscular, strident sounds for the Caribbean and Afrofuturist jazz fusion group Sons of Kemet, made up of tuba player Theon Cross, Shabaka, and 2 percussionists in Tom Skinner and Eddie Hick. Their latest album, Your Queen is a Reptile, also features poet Josh Idehen and explores Afro-Caribbean and British identities. Amongst its seductive melodies and beats, the album's songs are each named after unheralded but extremely influential women from history like Doreen Lawrence and Angela Davis. Without a chord instrument, the music here focuses much more on melodic lines and rhythmic grooves. Short, angular gestures from Shabaka often grow into soaring reggae or funk tunes, and this process leads to extremely memorable melodies like that of Inner Babylon from their first album, Burn. Listen to this. As you can hear, Shabaka Hutchings is bouncing ideas off of his co-star in Skronk, Theon Cross on tuba, himself a rising star in the London jazz scene. Theon Cross simultaneously echoes the wub-wubs of dubstep reggae whilst sparring with Shabaka in call and response lines or cracking out a gorgeous Jaco Pastorius style bass riff. This guy has chops of steel. I've done tuba playing like this and it is exhausting. Finally, there is Shabaka and the Ancestors, which is Hutchings' most introspective project, and where he collaborates with predominantly South African musicians. Formed in 2016, their first album, Wisdom of the Elders, featured no angry synthesizers or fractured beats. Instead, Hutchings' tenor sax are pitched against an acoustic ensemble driven by double bass, Fender Rhodes, and the fire-stirring voice of Siyabonga Mtembu. Their latest album, We Are Sent Here by History, embodies the plethora of musical styles that this group channels through its acoustic soundscape, ranging from the compulsive 10-minute blast of the opening track, They Who Must Die, to the more contemplative, gospel-inspired, Go My Heart, Go to Heaven. Have a listen to this one. From influences of West African classical music to dub reggae and Afrofuturistic beats, as well as hat tips to Sun Ra, John Coltrane and New Orleans trad jazz, Shabaka Hutchings and his various projects exemplify the London jazz scene and what it is all about. He is now seen as something of a mentor to upcoming artists all around the UK. In 2018, Hutchings organised the recording of a compilation album called We Out Here that featured a host of London's latest jazz stars, including the Coltrane-esque Maisha Ensemble, the Afrobeat innovators Kokoroko. There is the drummer Moses Boyd diving deeper into his electronics and percussion experiments, and then there's the Ezra Collective, who blend jazz, hip-hop and Afrofuturist beats seamlessly. Another superstar to appear on this compilation album was saxophonist Nabia Garcia. who at just 29 years of age has released several stunning albums like Nabia's 5 and When We Are in 2018. Remarkably, her band is built on graduates of Trinity Laban's jazz course in southeast London, and their music develops Shabaka Hutchings' fusion of musical cultures, dub, reggae, Latin, funk, Afrobeat. But Nabia Garcia's approach to song structures and melodies bring a maturity to this fusion of sounds. These previously disparate musics sound completely at home with one another in her work, an effortless amalgamation that frames Garcia's emotive and meaningful improvisation style. As you'll hear now in this track, When We Are, it is Garcia's storytelling abilities on her saxophone that are a large part of why her audiences have flocked to see performances. Now we come to a musician who has rewritten the rule book. So far we've talked about music that has evolved from fusions with other music styles to create new jazz. Well, how about a completely new approach to jazz harmony, mixed with an instrumental, vocal and compositional virtuosity perhaps unmatched in the history of jazz? Enter Jacob Collier. Jacob Collier, in case you've been living under a rock for the last 5 years, originally grew an audience on YouTube with the remarkable multi-instrumentalism, rhythmic polystylism and wonderful palette of colours in his covers of famous songs. His cover of Hideaway in particular caught listeners' attention. The sounds from his first album, In My Room, though, were just a taste of things to come. Amongst his arsenal of jazz language, something truly remarkable was developing that he started to incorporate, and this was just intonation. And to explain this, we need to go
To the keyboard.
The semitones that we use in Western classical music, and jazz in fact, are made up. These equally distanced notes do not exist in nature at all, and instead natural materials and brass overtones and the harmonics on violin strings and guitar strings corresponds to a phenomenon called the harmonic series, which works by multiplying a root frequency, say 40 Hz, by exact intervals. The resultant notes from these exact multiplications are not in tune with normal Western tuning systems, but that doesn't mean that they sound bad when you put them together. When you play a chord of natural harmonics notes, something strange happens. There is a ring to them that isn't present when you play a normal C major chord on the piano. Let's listen to a specific example here. I'm going to play a B flat 7 chord on the piano first, which is of course equally tempered, and then the same chord on brass instruments, where you'll hear the ring of that natural series in just intonation. Jacob Collier incorporates just intonation into his harmonic vocabulary with remarkable results, never clearer than his rendition of In the Bleak Midwinter. Using only his voice and a musical ear capable of tuning to these microtones, Collier leads us on a stunning harmonic and textural journey, eventually, due to him sticking to the rules of just intonation, modulating to G half sharp major at the end of the piece. And I don't have time now, but if you want to learn more about Jacob's harmony here, check out the YouTuber June Lee and his page, which you'll find a link for below me. Beyond his harmony, Jacob's compositional approach borders on the supernatural, with frequent wild changes in texture, complex polyrhythms drawing from many musical traditions around the world, And of course, he can jump from double bass to grand piano to a drum kit seamlessly, and as he often does at live shows. Jacob has captured a wider audience than most right now by blending in pop, funk, rock and West African influences into his music, whilst also continuing to cover famous tunes like Lionel Richie's All Night Long and Henry Mancini's Moon River. All I can really do to sum up his work is to encourage you all to go and listen to his last two albums, Jesse Volume 1 and Volume 2. Volume 3 is out later this year. In these, Jacob collaborates with everyone from the Metropole Orchestra to bands like Take Six, legends like Herbie Hancock, and singers from around the world like Jojo and Umu Sangare. Listen to his outrageous reimagining of Here Comes the Sun, here featuring singer Dodie and taken from Jesse Volume 2.
Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun, and I say it's alright.
Now there are certainly some of you watching rather expectantly, waiting for one particular band to be mentioned. Well, I've been saving it for the end, okay? In 2004, a bass player and composer called Michael League started a band called Snarky Puppy, who after a decade of writing epic music but struggling to grow their audience, saw a sudden surge in support as new jazz fans cropped up all over the world. Snarky Puppy is hugely unique in its bass instrumentation, although this does vary wildly from piece to piece. It usually features 2 trumpets and saxophones, at least 2 keyboard players, Michael League on bass, guest singers, 2 guitarists, a kit player, and more than 2 auxiliary percussionists who I swear have some sort of supernatural telepathic abilities. This band is a landmark in the history of jazz in so many ways, from the virtuosity of Michael League's arrangements and the band's groove, to the space left for soloists to make their mark, the unique song structures and the balance of countless musical influences, not to mention their collaborative nature with 2 groundbreaking collaboration albums, Family Dinner 1 and 2, where everyone from Jacob Collier to Salif Keita and Ledisi have performed with them. Snarky Puppy have 3 Grammy Awards as a band, and they act as jazz ambassadors around the world, teaching masterclasses and encouraging newer projects with Michael League's record label, Ground Up. Now, just in case you've never heard this band play, listen to this chart called Lingus from one of their earlier albums, We Like It Here. This song exploded on YouTube because of a certain synth solo by Corey Henry, but it also features micro-rhythmic grooves that cannot be notated by standard means, and some wonderful horn writing. Listen to this from the end of the song. Rather than an obsession with jazz tradition and following the rules of past musicians, jazz artists today seem far more interested in expressing their own voices, using the music that they love and that's powerful to them. In other words, unlike the 90s and noughties, today's jazz musicians aren't keeping jazz alive. They're forging ahead, regardless of genre boundaries, and captivating audiences around the world in the process. This speaks of the power and adaptability of jazz's fundamental techniques. Jazz can still convey powerful social messages, it can still fuse with other musics, and its principles of ensemble communication and basic approach to harmony are still providing new ideas for artists everywhere. It gives me an enormous thrill to be able to say that we're living in a golden age of jazz. So everyone, after this episode and after this series, go out and listen to all of it. If you're still desperate to learn more about the modern jazz world, please don't hesitate to get in touch. I'll answer any questions that you throw my way. And as always, you'll find a cracking playlist filled with the fabulous artists who I just haven't had time to talk about today, including some who have transformed their respective jazz worlds, especially Esperanza Spalding and her composition style and bass technique, and Ambrose Akinmusire and his otherworldly trumpet sound. This is it, everyone, episode 10, and the last of the first season of Emergency Jazz with James. But do not fear though, because I shall be returning before you know it. I hope that from this series you can go out into the world and enjoy playing jazz even more, using all of this new knowledge of the social and cultural context attached to this powerful jazz music. For my part, it's been an absolute pleasure to share these stories and sounds with you all these last couple of months. Before we finish today, I have one final thought for you all. In these challenging and tragic times where many people have lost loved ones and struggled in so many other ways, music and the arts have provided great comfort and hope to millions around the world. So as we start to come out of this COVID-19 lockdown, we need everyone to be vocal about jazz and the arts so that countries like the UK don't lose their wonderfully diverse artistic and cultural landscapes. As powerful and innovative as current jazz is though, innovation and creativity require funding. And without musical education in schools, stable, adequate funding for concerts and venues, and a bold community outreach plan that reaches those with fewer musical opportunities, this thriving jazz scene could disappear in just a matter of years. Everyone, again, thank you so much for tuning in these last 10 weeks in Emergency Jazz with James. And remember to stay tuned, because before you'll know it, I'll be back with much, much more.